I'm Jordan Rayner, and this is the Word Before Work. Today we're reading from Romans 15, verse 20. Here's what the Apostle Paul says in this verse. He says, "It has always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known, so that I would not be building on someone else's foundation." As we've been exploring throughout this short series, Paul chose to work as a tent maker in conjunction with his preaching ministry for some very deliberate reasons. In the previous devotional in this series, we saw that Paul worked in the marketplace as a means of becoming all things to all people and winning the respect of outsiders. But why was Paul so eager to win the respect of the lost? In Romans 15, verse 20, Paul alludes to his answer. He says, quote, "It has always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known," end quote. Paul worked as a tent maker to become all things to all people so that he might increase his opportunities to preach the gospel to those who had yet to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. Paul's work as a tent maker would have allowed him to preach the gospel in at least two powerful ways: through his actions and through his words. While the New Testament gives us a tremendous glimpse at Paul's eloquence and ability to preach the gospel using written and spoken word, one has to imagine that Paul preached an at least equally powerful sermon by simply living a Christ-transformed life as he worked alongside his fellow tent makers, his fellow craftsmen, his fellow tradesmen and women. As you and I can know from experience, modeling Christ-like character at work is one of the most effective ways to make the gospel winsome to the lost. Paul undoubtedly understood this and leveraged the attention his character would have received to point outsiders to the gospel explicitly through his words. As the theologian T.G. Soers once pointed out, the New Testament accounts of Paul's ministry, quote, suggest the constant personal evangelism that Paul must have carried on during his hours of labor with the various fellow workers with whom he was thrown into companionship, end quote. Again, that's the theologian T.G. Soers speaking there. So, Paul clearly worked as a means of becoming all things to all people and to preach the gospel in word and deed. But as we'll see in the final devotional in this series, there is one final reason why I think Paul chose to work as a tent maker. As the biblical account of Priscilla and Aquila make clear, Paul also leveraged his vocation to disciple other believers, thus multiplying the spread of the gospel around the world. Today's devotional only scratches the surface of how God's Word connects to our work. If you want to go deeper, sign up for my free 20-day devotional called The Word Before Work Foundations at twbwfoundations.com. These email devotionals are designed to help you gain a rich understanding of the biblical narrative of work, how exactly your work matters for eternity, and what those truths mean for how we ought to work today. You can sign up right now, again, for free at twbwfoundations.com.